Hi, I'm Dawn Damari, and you're listening to another episode of A Teaspoon of Healing. Today, I have a guest with me, Jeff Patterson. Jeff is the author of The Yielding Warrior. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the show. So, would you mind telling the people who are listening or watching this video a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yes, so I have a martial arts academy here in Portland, Oregon, and have been involved in the martial arts for about 36 years. I've been running this academy for 30 years. The martial arts led me into the meditative arts about a little over 30 years ago. And since then, I've been practicing various different forms of still and movement meditations. And my most recent book, The Yielding Warrior, it talks about the aspect of yielding, which is a philosophical concept in martial arts and yielding, and how to integrate that into your life and different methods and techniques that you can use to enhance those skills.
Great. And we will definitely go into more detail about that and what yielding is. But just wondering if you had any stories. Some guests, when they come on the show, they share some of their own journeys of personal healing or transformation. So has martial arts or the meditative arts helped you transform your life in any way or helped you heal from anything in any way?
Yes, so I got turned on to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. When I was a young guy, about 19 years old, I was really into Western boxing. And I used to train at a boxing gym just a few blocks here from my academy back in the late 80s and early 90s. And there was a very well-known coach who trained there, and he had actually created national and world champion level competitors. And I really wanted to get him to notice me and spend a little bit of time with me and get to learn from him because he was such an inspiration to me. And so I started showing up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and kind of following him around for 3 or 4 months. And finally, he started giving me a little bit of attention and showing me a few things. And every time he taught me anything, I treated it like it was gold. I drilled it over and over again and put a lot of time and energy and focus and thought behind it. Well, it was only about maybe 2 or 3 weeks after he started helping me out where he said something to me that changed my life forever. And he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. And back then, as a young guy, I remember thinking, isn't like Tai Chi for old people in the park? How is that going to help me be a better boxer? And I had no idea where I was going with this, but I had a lot of respect for him, and I knew he was trying to help me. And so I decided to take on the practice. Well, as I did this, he wanted me doing an hour every day as part of my ritual practice with my meditative arts in correlation with all of my boxing training. And so every morning I would go down in my basement, and he told me to do an hour. So I would usually do about an hour and a half. And I would do this every day religiously. About 3 or 4 months go by. And he showed me in the first couple sessions through the first three movements of the form, which you can learn in one session. And that's all I did for 3 or 4 months. And I remember thinking, is this guy ever going to show me anything? I'm doing this an hour and a half every day, and I'm doing these same three movements over and over again. What am I supposed to learn from this? And I could tell that he knew that I was getting a little frustrated with my training, and I didn't want to spoil the opportunity to get to train with him. So I just kept pushing forward. And then something happened at about probably the 7 month mark. I went down in my basement and I went to do my training, and I looked up at the clock, and an hour and a half had already gone by, and it seemed like 15 minutes. And I
Wow.
was just really inspired, and I couldn't figure out what happened. I was like, what was that? And so from that point on, I started diving into the meditative arts, and it's changed my life in so many ways. And, through the years, I've been teaching now for over 30 years. I've had over 25,000 students come through my academy, and I've seen the meditative arts change hundreds of people's lives, and which is why I'm so passionate about it and following this path.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's what's really cool. And I liked how you had mentioned, I had thought this too when I was younger. When you Tai Chi, I used to associate that as well with older people in the park. But it's actually, it's we can talk about the benefits of it, but it's really cool, the meditative arts. But yeah, as younger people, sometimes they don't see it that way. So before we talk a little further about meditation, Tai Chi, and Qigong, for those people out there who don't know what Qigong is, can you describe Qigong?
Yeah, so qigong has five different
Oh, I
directions.
said it
It
wrong.
has
I said it
the
wrong.
march.
Sorry. Qigong.
It's
Yeah, sorry
all
about
good.
that.
Yeah.
It's Qigong. I,
So it has the martial or athletic side of the practice, the therapeutic side, the medical side, the philosophical side, and then also the meditative or spiritual side. And the nice thing about this being so open is that you could be 90 years old and do this practice and have it be very beneficial, or you could be a high level professional athlete and do this practice and get a lot of benefits from it. And so, with this, it gives you the opportunity to build a life practice around your lifestyle at whatever stage you are in life. And there's a lot of different directions you can take the practice with doing. We kind of have it broken up into three different modalities of practice. We have our ritual practices, our active practices, and our philosophical practices. And so learning how to build a life practice around these kind of three different methods and incorporating different breathing strategies, different movement exercises, different sitting and standing meditations are all what help us build that practice around our lifestyle.
okay. So you had mentioned there's three types of meditation: ritual, active, and philosophical. So do you mind describing those a little bit? And then how do people know what type is good for them?
Yeah, so ritual practices are kind of the core of your meditative practice, and they could be anything from a sitting meditation, a standing meditation, a movement series through Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga postures, anything you're doing that brings you into that internal meditative state and you do for a period of time where you're not looking at a screen, you're not listening to an audio, where you're turning your focus inward. And so you could do this in as little as 20 minutes a day or longer. What I find with new students is that getting them to commit to doing a 20-minute a day ritual is really powerful because it's very easy. Everybody's got at least 20 minutes that they can devote to themselves to do a practice like this, and you can get a lot of benefits from that short amount of time. Now, when you're doing a practice like this, it's also important to find other ways to integrate what you're learning in these new found awarenesses of the body and the mind and integrate them into everything we do in life. And so that's where we move into kind of the active practices. And active practices are really an essential tool when developing a meditation program because we use those all day, every day. And you can do that when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. And so, what an active practice is could be something like counting out 10 breaths, or maybe doing some spinal rotations or a movement exercise, something that helps bring our awareness back into our body and mind and making that connection. And then through time, we're doing these active practices maybe once an hour throughout the day or every 90 minutes in unison with our ritual practice. And now it's like we're starting to live the lifestyle of the meditative arts rather than doing it as a hobby once in a while. And it's really pretty simple to integrate these practices. A lot of times people think you need to retire to a cave and meditate it 4 hours every day to really get any benefit from meditation. And that's so not the case. You can easily integrate it into your life with a fairly minimal level of commitment.
Okay. So the active practice. So how do you know if active is better for you or ritual, or is it things? Can you kind of combine the two of them? Both act like you can do ritual to kind of get into the meditative mode, and then active. It sounds like that's more about like bringing you back to your body.
Yeah, so they're both very important. So the ritual practice is kind of the core of your practice, and I recommend doing that
Okay.
every day. And so you have,
Okay.
say, your 20-minute ritual practice that you do every day. And then
Okay.
throughout the day, you're doing these little active practices, which can be done in as little as 60 seconds, 2 minutes. It doesn't need to be where we spend a lot of time doing these. And they're just things that we can do sometimes in coordination with other activities. And so just bringing our awareness back to that is a way to integrate these practices and ideas into our lifestyle.
Oh, okay. So everyone should have a ritual. The ritual should be the core of your practice, like you said, and so the active you can do those for a few minutes throughout the day. And now you had also mentioned the philosophical type of meditation or meditative practice. So what is that?
So the philosophical practices can be either active or ritual based, and they could be things like something like a simple gratitude practice or possibly a memorization of different sayings or a mantra that you do and working on the vibrations of the sound to try to get benefit towards relaxation or a simple different kind of focus. With the different energy centers in the body, with a lot of the meditations we do, we focus on what we call our upper dantian or lower dantian. And the upper dantian is located in the pituitary and pineal gland in the center of the mind.
Okay.
Sometimes some of these sounds that we make, we can use that to vibrate and kind of find that help us find that location. And then we can also use different sounds and different sayings and things to try to bring that energy down and settle in our lower dantian, which is our main energy center in the body. And so some of these philosophical practices could be used like that. Others could be like, if are you familiar with the Tao Te Ching?
Yes, yes, a little bit.
So the Tao Te Ching is 81 sayings of Taoist philosophy, and the story behind that is pretty interesting. It was uh, at one time Lao Tzu was brought in to be like an advisor for the emperor, and he went to him for advice to learn how to be more efficient with ruling the nation. Well, after a few years of doing this, Lao Tzu couldn't stand being in the city and he had to get back out to nature and meditate. And one day he decided he was going to leave. And he takes off, and the emperor realizes, hey, I need him here. I've got questions I need to ask him. And so he sends his troops out to go find him. And he's held up at a riverbed waiting to cross the next morning because night was falling. And he said, well, I'm not going to go back, but I'll write everything down for him. And in that one night, he stayed up all night and wrote down the 81 sayings of the Tao Te Ching, and they brought it back to the emperor, and he used that. And since then, it's become one of the most well-known books, other than the Bible, that's on the planet. And so
Hmm.
now that story is a little bit myth. I don't know how much of that is true or not, but it's those sayings are very powerful in that you can go through those and memorize those, and they're very helpful for integrating some of these meditative and philosophical thoughts into your meditation practice. And that's another example of something you could use for the philosophical side of the practice.
Oh, cool. Thank you for that. All of those sound really beneficial, and I'm actually interested in trying some of this. So, when I was reading your bio, there was something interesting is that you had mentioned that you can use meditation, qigong, these type of things. We often hear about these to calm your mind. So it was a little bit about that, but you had also mentioned that this can be used to optimize performance in your life. And I think that's unique. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and if I'd like to touch on both of those real briefly. The first one,
Mhm.
quieting your mind. And the reason why I would like to spend a minute with this is because it's probably the most common thing I've heard through the years is that people will come into the academy or come to the practice and they'll say, I've tried meditation, but I just can't do it. I can't quiet the mind. And it's this misconception or misunderstanding of
Oh.
what meditation is all about. Meditation isn't this place of nirvana where you go and you magically let all the thoughts in your mind disappear. Meditation is a process, and the idea is when we sit down to meditate or do your standing meditation or movement practice, whatever it is, there's going to be periods of time where your mind wanders or you have a distracting thought. Well, with the meditative practice, we use our breath, we use our posture, we use the movement to take that distraction and bring it back to center. Now, every time we do this, we have these, you might sit down for 20 minutes and have 50 different distractive thoughts and 50 different times that you bring yourself back into center and focus on your posture and your breath. Every time you do this, you're building a repetition and training yourself how to deal with a distraction and come back to that focused state. And so you can use that at any time, any conversation you have, anything that comes up with you during the day that leads you down a negative path or on a distracted thought process. And we use that to come back to center. And now we can be a lot more focused and respond to things with a lot more educated approach and coming at it from a more relaxed present state rather than getting off on a kind of a negative direction. Then the other thing is you mentioned for performance.
Hmm.
A lot of the benefits for performance are the mental side of things, just like what we were just talking about. In sports, it's so important to be present and in the moment. And say you're a soccer athlete and you make a bad shot, and you spend the next 30 seconds getting down on yourself for this bad shot that you made. You already missed maybe three other opportunities to make a positive play for your team. And so the practice can help us be more focused in that way. And then the other thing it can do is by learning some of the concepts, for example, yielding. So, yielding being there's three different kinds of yielding: there's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that, say, I push you and you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage can push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force. And now I can respond with less effort. This is used in athletics all of the time, right? And so we learn how to be strategic about our physical placement and our movement. And this helps us get an advantage on sometimes people that are a lot bigger and stronger than us. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed. The breath has to be even and calm, and the mind has to be present. It takes years and years to get to a high level of this, but from day one, you start experiencing these benefits and seeing things at a higher level inside yourself by practicing the meditative arts. Now, once you start to see those things more clearly, this is where it becomes very interesting. And now we're kind of moving into what I call mental yielding. Say, for example, I say something that unsettles you, because I'm so much more in tune with myself, I also start to see things more clearly in other people. So maybe I pick up on that sense of being unsettled right from the beginning. It's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention. Pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so, learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is a very powerful idea, not only because you're being more considerate and polite to people, but also because you can use this strategically in interactions, in sales, and negotiations, into finding a path of a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And so, it can be used in many different areas this way. Then we lead into emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with our own interpersonal conflicts. So when we think about something that happens to us, oftentimes we'll respond and we'll go down this path. And we might get an hour, a day, a week down this road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But but
Yeah.
but by us having an increased awareness because of our meditative practice, a lot of times we can notice that disturbance before it starts gaining too much momentum and say, maybe this is a better approach and take it a different way. And so this is some ideas on how you can use yielding in different directions, in multiple ways for yourself and in competition and athletics.
Oh, okay. So it seems like it's useful for performance in athletics, but also in your life. And you had mentioned that last one, emotional yielding. That was really interesting. So if you can get good at that, it could probably really help your interpersonal relationships with others, whether a significant other, friends, family.
Very much so. And, a lot of people come to the meditative arts because of anxiety or stress or depression. And learning how to train the mind and train the breath, learning how to, we have the five regulations in a meditative practice. We have regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy in the body, and regulating the spirit. Through the practice, we learn how to cultivate those areas. And that helps our outcome in learning how to deal with these stresses that come up or this anxiety that might be presented if we're dealing with those kind of issues that are affecting the way that we respond to people. These practices will help us, give us tools to learn how to navigate this with the least amount of resistance or through yielding.
Oh, okay. And you had mentioned the five regulations. So do you mind talking in depth about one or two of them?
Yeah, sure. So, for example, think about when we talk about regulating the body. If I was sitting down at my desk all day with my shoulders hunched forward and typing on the computer for 4 or 5 hours, I would be getting stiff neck. I'd be getting, uh, very lethargic. I'd be getting just not in a very good energetic state. Now, say maybe my most admired person in the world comes in the door, think about how I'm going to perk up and get excited and the different energetic states that I'm going to be in those two different scenarios. This is how the simple idea of learning how to be in a correct posture and energetically move through space and time with our bodies can change our emotional and mental state throughout the day. And so regulating the body is very important, and it's usually the first one that we try to focus on because it's the easiest one to change. It just takes a little bit of consistent effort, but with a little bit of work and time, it's pretty easy to get your body to where you're performing with pretty optimal structural alignment. Then we talk about the breath. So the breath
Mhm.
is, in qigong, we it's often referred to as the science of the breath, and there is literally
Oh,
hundreds of
okay.
different breathing strategies, and all of these strategies have a purpose and give us different outcomes. In Chinese philosophy, they call um, this strategy or this idea balancing the kan and li, or the water and fire. And we have the water side of the breath and the fire side of the breath. And we can use the breath to get different mental, physical, and emotional outcomes just by understanding how to use it strategically. And some like real applicable examples I can give you is, think about if you ever have a period of in your life where you cried a lot, or you got really upset, or you started leading to depression through this. What happens when we do this is, we start, when you cry, you inhale longer than you exhale, and that
Mhm.
brings the energy inward, which over a period of time can weaken the immune system, can bring your energy level down, can be very depleting, and can lead to illness, which is why a lot of people, when they get depressed, they get sick. Now, there's benefits for bringing this energy inward. Every night when we sleep, we do longer inhales and shorter exhales. And that's the body's natural way of bringing the energy into the center line and being more in our subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. Then we have the other side of that, which is the yang side of the breath. And you think about, if a time maybe when you're laughing, ha ha ha, you exhale longer than you inhale, and this brings the energy outward. This is very expansive. Or maybe you pick up something heavy and you use the breath to put power into your exercise or anything that you're doing. And that helps generate
Mhm.
energy and power. And so we can use the breath as a strategy to help us balance our physical and emotional state. And so it's a really important part of the practice, learning how to use this breath in all of our ritual sessions and our active practices. You know, a lot of times you'll meet people who go through the day with emotional ups and downs, and they're kind of like a roller coaster.
Mhm.
Understanding how to use the breath, when we see an imbalance in our emotional state, we can use the breath to bring it back down or to pick it back up. And instead of going through the day with emotional ups and downs that are very draining, we can be a little bit more balanced by knowing how to use that as a strategy.
Well, thank you for that. I really liked both of them. I thought they were very applicable to me, and I'm sure a lot of people will find them applicable to them as well. So the breathing, and I like what you mentioned about crying. So, like you said, when you get depressed, oftentimes people that are depressed they get sick. So I know, all of us have had times where they've been crying a lot. I do remember that. Yeah, you go, and you're inhaling a lot, and so if you find yourself kind of in that state, like you're upset about something and you notice that, what can you do? Can you just breathe outward more, or what
Yeah,
should you
so
do?
so exactly. So you notice, and there's two things to this question. One is, a lot of times we don't recognize that state change until we've already gained a fair amount of momentum into it. And it's a lot harder to change an energetic state when you're hysterical than it is when there's a little bit of an imbalance. And the meditative arts helps us see that imbalance right when it first happens. And when it first happens, that's when we would start bringing that breath change in and start really focusing on the exhale, maybe lengthening the exhale, maybe putting a little bit of an audible sound to the exhale, maybe even a soft retention at the end of the exhale. These are all things that it can expand that yang style energy, which will help balance those negative feelings that we're having, and is a very powerful tool to use in your life in many ways.
Oh, that's really cool. So the better you get at at meditation, or just within the meditative arts and learning how to master the breath, you're going to be able to kind of see the change of state before you get too hysterical, where it's kind of, well, almost too, maybe not too late, but it's harder to make a change.
Yes, you will definitely become a lot more sensitive. And when I explain the yielding idea to people, and which I've been doing for years, I often will hear people say, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I use that all the time in or my conversations or whatever. And I totally agree. I think everybody does use this idea of yielding to some degree. However, it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about that crime scene, about the series of events and the timeline that we would have no idea, or at least I know I would have no idea of. The meditative arts helps us see things that most people will never have any idea of unless they have a meditative practice. And so while some of these things may resonate and make sense, what I find, with teaching the martial arts and you have a disciplined athlete, it's pretty easy to get an athlete up to 85% of his potential if he's willing to put in the work. But to get them to 90%, 95%, 97%, now you're talking about like the Michael Jordans and the Kobe Bryants that are almost magical with what they do, right? I
Hmm.
feel like the only way that you can get to those upper 90% or even close to that is with a meditative practice. It'll help you see things inside yourself and other people that I don't think that you could ever see without having a practice like this.
Okay. Well, that's really cool. So, the question I have is, so you have a program that incorporates all of these things, and that's the Yielding Warrior program. So, what is involved within that?
So right now I'm running a special where I'm giving away a copy of the Yielding Warrior. If you just pay for shipping and handling, you can get that at theyieldingwarrior.com/book. And
Okay.
with that, you have the opportunity to check out our online program, which teaches you about how to integrate these meditative practices, how to build an evolving meditation practice around your lifestyle. And that's another important thing to think about when you're doing a meditative practice is that it's not going to be the same now, next year, and 5 years, and 10 years. You're always going to be growing with your practice and learning new ways to integrate some of these breathing strategies, some of these movement practices, some of these sitting meditations, the energetic circulations in the body. This is my profession. I've been studying this for 36 years. I've been teaching it for over 30. I'm still just a student. I'm not the master, and it's one of the things that I find so much fun about this art is that it is so deep and there's so many different directions you can take it.
Oh, okay. So that's what was another question I had. So how can people get your book? So it sounds like if you go to theyieldingwarrior.com and you pay shipping and handling, then then you can get pretty much a free copy of the book, just the shipping and handling.
Yeah, so it's $9.95 for shipping and handling, and it's yieldingwarrior.com/book. We'll get you to that
Oh, forward slash
page.
book.
But if you go to theyieldingwarrior.com, you can look into the different membership options and our teacher training program. And then if you're ever in Portland, Oregon, we have the academy here. You're welcome to come in and visit us here as well.
Oh, that's really cool. So that you have, I noticed that you have um, an academy there in Portland. So, and what do you do in there? Is it martial arts as well, or is it the meditative arts too?
Yeah, so we have four different adult programs. We have our meditative arts program, which is a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about in this call. And then we have our Brazilian Jiu Jitsu program, our striking program, which is boxing and Muay Thai, and our Eskrima program, which is a Filipino based martial art.
Oh, cool. Well, if I ever get back to Portland, I lived there briefly a while back and I visited. I love Portland. Maybe I'll come check it out. So
Nice.
if people are in the area, they should check that out. That's really cool. It's great. Sounds like it's great for the mind and the body. As martial arts is a good workout. It's not easy.
Yes.
So thanks for coming on the show. So before we sign off, is there anything that you would like to share with the people who are listening or watching this?
Maybe just one other quick thought on integrating meditation into your life. And that would be, I've heard a lot of people tell me that they listen to this audio or they watch this meditation. And while I think it's good to learn different things by listening to things and watching different videos, and it's a way to take the information in, for your ritual practices and that time where you're setting that 20 minutes aside every day, make sure that there's no external input coming in. You don't want to be listening to an audio, you don't want to be watching a screen. They're called the internal arts or the meditative arts for a reason, in that we go inside, we look inside of ourselves to get to a deeper connection. And if everything you're doing when you meditate is listening to an audio or watching a screen, it's kind of the opposite. And so just keep that in mind as you're starting a practice.
Okay, that's really helpful. So just going internal, not listening to maybe a meditative thing like an app on your phone or watching something, just kind of finding a quiet place and just doing it. Yes, that's really great. Well, thank you again, Jeff, for coming on the show. I learned a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did too. And I'm interested in learning more. So people should check out theyieldingwarrior.com. And if they want the book, to go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book /book.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
So thank you, Jeff. Have a good evening.